depends on that. If you guys can see it, it should be fine. If you can't, then that's another story. So, the last time I was here in Hobart was in 2018. Didn't know anybody here. We just actually went around and just enjoyed a little bit of Hobart for a visitation. So happy to be here once again. You know, we often talk about victory and we don't take much time to look at defeat. And just briefly before we go into victory, I do want to go a little bit about some failures. There are some causes. If we can understand what failure is, then we can look at how to resolve the problem. A lot of times an airplane has an accident, and what they do, the first thing they do is try to find out what caused the failure. What was it that caused the failure? And as a result, they're able to repair a lot of things because they know what was wrong and how to resolve it. One of our brethren that just joined our church in Virginia, he is getting his doctorate in mechanical engineering, specifically with airplane engines. And they have this engine that they turn on every once in a while, and they throw in sand, they throw in rocks, they throw in all sorts of stuff to see how it reacts and how they can fix some of those problems so that when airplanes are flying, they don't get knocked down because of that. And sometimes we need to look at that as well. One of the very first failures that we can look at actually is in the Garden of Eden. And when we look at the Garden of Eden in Genesis 3, one of the things that you notice, especially in verse 8, they heard the voice of the Lord God walking in the garden in the cool of the day. And Adam and his wife did what? What did they do? It says here, they hid themselves from the presence of the Lord. So what Adam and Eve did, when we find that the relationship with God, sin can only happen when you are not in the presence of God. And so they hid themselves from the presence of God. It's interesting when you look at Cain and Abel. After Cain had killed his brother, one of the interesting things to me in chapter 4, verse 16, is that Cain went out from what? What did he leave? He went from the presence of the Lord. So what did Cain want to do? What was his plan? What did he want to do from now on? He wanted to sin. And how can you sin? You have to do what? You have to go out from the presence of the Lord. And so one of the things that you can look at, one of the links in this whole issue of failure is not living in the presence of God. If many times, even a thief, what does he do first?
Checks it out.
Checks what out?
Where he wants to go.
And then what? Make sure no one's around. Okay, he doesn't want to be seen. He wants to be, that's why a lot of criminal activities happens when? At night. Why at night? Not to be seen. Okay, and sometimes, even if somebody's just walking around, it stops things. A lot of times they have police presence, and just having their presence stops crime. Okay, they don't have to do anything, just presence of someone. And so I'd like us to look at the whole issue of complete victory, because we're looking at how to obtain complete victory in our lives. That's a struggle that we're facing, is how to obtain victory. One of the problems with having complete victory is the nature of God. The nature of God in 1 Timothy 1 verse 17, it says, now unto the King eternal, immortal, and notice the next one there, what is it? Invisible. This is the problem with God. He's invisible. And if God was visible to us all the time, what would happen? Our life would be different. Completely different, because you're in the presence of God. And so many times in our lives, we act as if God is not here, because He is invisible. We can't see Him. And how can you worship someone that you don't see? How is it? Because God is invisible, we sin because He is invisible, and we worship a God who we can't see. How do you worship a God that you can't see? How do you believe in something that you don't see? In Romans chapter 1, Apostle Paul is saying this to the believers in Rome. And he says, "For the invisible things of him from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse." So we know things exist because we see the results. Okay, you see the results of this house. This house is built, I think you mentioned like 90 years ago. Okay, well, how do you know somebody built it?
It's here.
The house is here. Okay, the person is invisible. You know, you never met the person who built the house, but you know that there was a builder that built this house because there is something resulting from it. And so when we look at God, we know that God exists because we look at his creation. There are things that you look out there. When you study creation, it's a marvel. When people actually have to go out of their way not to believe in the Creator God. When they're studying biology, when they're studying the earth, they have to go out of their way to do that because the evidences are so much there. One of the astronauts, Neil Armstrong, when he got out to outer space and he looked on Earth, he became a believer. He says, now God has to exist. When he's looking at that Earth out there, there is no reason it can stay out there like that. So, in order to understand this concept of God, we still have to exercise an element of faith. Even here, we have to exercise an element of faith that there was a builder here. But we have the evidences, and we look at these evidences. Based on the evidences, we then have faith. Now, to have constant faith that God is actually present, this is the thing, that God is actually present, we need to have that by faith, and it needs to be constant. And when I look at the Bible, there is one man's experience more than any others that shows me this constant faith. And that's the example of Moses. Moses is really intriguing to me. His life was really intriguing. In the verse that we read earlier, by faith, Moses, when he was come to years, refused to be what? The son of Pharaoh's daughter. Can you imagine? Here is this guy that's supposed to be killed as a child. He is rescued. His mother is there, but he only has him for 12 years. The rest of his life, he's taken away. And Pharaoh's daughter becomes his mother. She is his mother. Even though she is, in one sense, a foster mother, but she is still his mother. Okay? And now he comes to years, and he decides, no, I don't want to be her son. Let's understand a little bit about this, because sometimes we don't understand the gravity of this situation. What actually was he refusing? Was he refusing her?
No.
No, he was not refusing her. You know, she probably was a really good mother to him. He can appreciate all that she did for him, saving him and everything else. But what did it mean to refuse to become the son of Pharaoh's daughter? Okay? So when he refused to become the son of Pharaoh's daughter, it means he was refusing to become Pharaoh. So he was actually supposed to be the next Pharaoh. And he said no to that. And let's just grasp this a little bit. Who actually was Pharaoh? Obviously, one of the things we can look at, Pharaoh was supposed to be God. Okay, and so he definitely refused to become worshipped as God. Okay, but aside from that, let's take a look at something here. Pharaoh obviously was the king of Egypt. Okay, that's who Pharaoh was. And remember, in the time of Joseph, because people were hungry, what did they do? What did they give to Pharaoh? They gave all their money. So Pharaoh owned all the money in Egypt. Can you imagine? To be the next Pharaoh, this is going to be all yours. All the money in Egypt is going to belong to you. And not only that, all the land in Egypt actually belonged to Pharaoh. So he owns all the money, he owns all the land. And the people sold themselves to Pharaoh in order to have food. And so all the people, all the land, and all the money belongs to Moses. A lot of times I hear people saying, I would give $1 million for Christ. Yeah, you would. Why? Because you don't have it. Okay? You want to give away something that you don't have, and then when you got to give a little bit of money in tithe, what happens? Well, I can't give that, but I would give $1 million. Well, you're not even able to give a little bit. Because we can give away something we don't have. In the case of Moses, it's not something he didn't have. It was his. All this belonged to Moses. It was actually in his hand. And when we think of Egypt, what was Egypt? Egypt was the most powerful nation on the earth at the time. Okay? And it was the wealthiest nation on earth at that time. So can you imagine being the next Pharaoh? You own all the money in the wealthiest nation on earth. You own all the land and everything. That is a lot. And Moses takes a look at that and says, I don't want that. And not only that, to be the next Pharaoh, he needed to have a certain type of education. And in Acts chapter 7, as Stephen is realizing that he's going to get stoned, he gives a little history lesson here. And he says there, and Moses was learned in all the wisdom of the Egyptians, and was mighty in words and deed. So basically, how much education did he have? In the wealthiest country
He had the best.
on the earth, he was learned in what? In all the wisdom of the Egyptians. In other words, there was nothing more in the schools of Egypt. The University of Egypt could not teach him anymore because he learned what? He learned everything there was to learn in that school, in that university. In Council of Parents, Teachers, and Students, it says there, Moses was learned in all the wisdom of the Egyptians. And notice this, in the providence of God, he had received a broad education. So God allowed him, God made it possible for Moses to be able to have a good understanding, a good education. Okay? So he had learned all the wisdom of the Egyptians, but there was a problem with the Egyptian learning. Okay? And it says here, but a large part of that education had to be what? Unlearned and accounted foolishness. So yes, he learned a lot. When you read the laws of Moses, a lot of that was Egyptian laws that Moses understood very well. And God helped him go through that. But it had to be unlearned. You know, when you look at why did it have to be unlearned? Okay, we're going to look at that in a moment, the next statement here. But first of all, the problem with the University of Egypt was what? Its impression had to be blotted out by 40 years of experience in caring for the sheep and the tender lambs. So the impressions that you had in the University of Egypt had to become blotted out. So sometimes it's not what you learn, it's the impressions that you go in that learning process. Why? What did he learn in the University of the Wilderness? So he had another university there. What did he have to unlearn? Notice here, it was implicit faith in God that made Moses what he was. According to all that the Lord commanded him, so he did. All the learning of the wise men could not make Moses a channel through which the Lord could work until, there's something here, until something happened. And what had to happen? Until he lost his self-confidence, realized his own helplessness, and put his trust in God. Until he was willing to obey God's command, whether they seemed to his human reason to be right or not. You know, the University of Egypt taught him a lot of things. He learned, he learned physics. He learned, mechanics. He learned all these things. And so when and he learned in war. He was a great warrior. Okay, he was a commander, a general of their army. And when you look at the experience when they left Egypt, they leave Egypt and they get down to the Red Sea. And when you come down to the Red Sea, so you approach now the Red Sea. You're coming down to the Red Sea. Hello, how are you? Come on in, find yourself a seat here.
You got the car open,
Yes.
obviously.
Well, welcome. We heard about that. We had a special prayer.
I've got recording going.
That's okay. Thank you. Did you get
Thank you.
So can you imagine? You go down to the Red Sea. You have the sea in front of you. You have this army coming behind you, and you're supposed to cross this Red Sea. So as an engineer, you can consider making a bridge. The problem is what?
Time
Time. You don't have the time.
and material.
Oh, maybe you can build some boats. But you can't do that either. So as an Egyptian, the learning of Egypt would lead you now to decide, okay, the only thing possible now is to make a compromise. As a leader, you can negotiate something, at least a better position for yourself, and then maybe the people can still go back to slavery, but somehow you can negotiate something for yourself. That's what you would learn in Egypt. But God says differently. God says, start walking into the water. There's statements there that mentions that until they got their feet wet, the Red Sea did not open. They had to actually go there and get their feet wet. Josephus says that the water was actually up to their chin before it opened up, but I don't know how accurate that is. But the fact is, you had to get into the water. Okay? And as you enter the water, then the Red Sea finally opens up. You see? And so, how do you do that? How do you enter into the Red Sea with all your animals, all the people? How do you do that? It had to be implicit faith. Notice here, you have to, first of all, you don't trust yourself, realize your helplessness, and put trust in God until he was willing to do what? Obey God's commands, whether they seem to his human reason to be right or not. To start walking into the Red Sea does not make sense. That does not make sense. But it makes all the sense in the world. After you went to the University of the Wilderness, after you spent 40 years learning to trust God, now God says, go into the Red Sea. Moses does what? Let's go into the Red Sea. You see, this is what he had to learn. You see, and so, in essence, if we go back to the issue of Pharaoh, to become the next Pharaoh of Egypt, it means to be the most educated man in Egypt, in reality the whole world. It meant to become the wealthiest, the most powerful man on the planet. That was actually in his hands. It was not imaginary. It was not something to think about. It was something that he actually had. It belonged to him. And he knew it belonged to him. And Moses, with all of this, in verse 24, he refused to become the son of Pharaoh's daughter. He says, no thank you. How many of us, with all those advantages, we say, no thank you? See, and instead, but it's even worse, Okay, so let's consider this. So he decides, no thank you, to be the next Pharaoh. Okay, but what does he desire to have? Notice the next verse, verse 25. Choosing rather to suffer affliction with the people of God than to enjoy the pleasure of sin for a season. So he chooses to suffer affliction with the people of God. And who are the people of God? Who are the people of God? They were slaves. I mean, who in their right mind? Okay, let's understand this, because this doesn't make sense. Who in their right mind decides, oh, I want to be a slave? You know, when we were kids, you know, you play what? You know, you're going to have a king, and I'm the king, I'm the queen. Who says, I want to be the slave, I want to be the slave? That doesn't make sense. And here Moses takes a look at this. He looks at Pharaoh, all that Pharaoh has, and he looks at this slave nation, and he says, I want to be with the slaves. Why? Why does he do that? You see, because when you look at it at first, it doesn't make sense. But you see, what makes sense is something different. The next verse, it says here, esteeming the reproach of Christ of greater riches than the treasures of Egypt, for he had respect unto the recompense of the reward. Moses saw something. And what is it that he saw? How do you consider this slave nation of greater riches than the treasures of Egypt? How are you able to do that? Well, it's quite simple. Verse 27. It says, by faith he forsook Egypt, not fearing the wrath of the king, for he endured as seeing him who is invisible. We come back to the point of being invisible. He saw the invisible God. And when Moses saw the invisible God, then the treasures of Egypt basically wasn't enough. Moses, I love Moses. You know why? Moses is not a man looking there and saying, wow, I really don't want the wealth of Egypt. Moses says, I want more wealth than Egypt. Did you know that?
His mother taught him well.
I want you to think about this. You see, because Moses could have been the next Pharaoh. And as the next Pharaoh, he would have been wealthy. Filthy wealthy, unreasonably wealthy. Okay? And he could have even been a good Pharaoh. Let's say he was a good Pharaoh. Let's say he was one of the best of the pharaohs. Treated everybody nicely. Just suppose he did that. And one day, I want you just to think for a moment, the last Pharaoh of Egypt dying. He's on his deathbed. There's the last Pharaoh of Egypt. And Moses looks there and says, I'm still alive. Yeah, isn't that true? Was Moses still alive? Yeah, last Pharaoh of Egypt, and Moses is like, I'm still alive. And Moses, and they're putting, for this Pharaoh, they could be putting all his wealth. All his wealth, they put in there in this big pyramid, and Moses looks at it, gold? Come on, I'm walking on streets of gold. I got something better. You see, our problem in this world is, in this world, we're focusing on the visible. If we can have a sense of the invisible, our values change completely. It's not, people, when you take somebody who takes money and puts it away into a fund, investment, for example, they're investing, they're not throwing it away. They're investing it for a future. Okay? So what happens is, Moses wasn't throwing away all the wealth of Egypt. He was doing what? He was investing it. He says, look, I don't need this. I'm going to put this in a better investment. And so Moses actually wanted something more than all the wealth of Egypt. The wealth of Egypt was not enough for him. Because the wealth of Egypt, the Pharaoh has to do something. What does he have to do? He has to die. That's the problem. And then what happens with the wealth? Stuck in some pyramid somewhere. Come on. That doesn't make sense. And so many times when we're looking at this world, we are getting stuck in some pyramid somewhere for the rest of eternity instead of something more valuable. And the way to see the more valuable was to see the invisible. You see, when you look at the context here, he forsook Egypt. He forsook the value of Pharaoh. He forsook everything. Why? Because he saw the invisible God. The character that Paul thus ascribes to Moses does not mean simple passive resistance of evil, but perseverance in the right. He kept the Lord ever before him, and the Lord was ever at his right hand to help him. In other words, he saw God everywhere. So he's there in Pharaoh's household, still living in Pharaoh. Why does he go out to see how the Israelites are doing? Because he saw the invisible God. So yes, somebody mentioned his mother taught him. Yeah, those first 12 years was so strong that even as he started getting confused in Egypt, because keep in mind, he started getting confused. Okay, he decided to go out there and he killed the Egyptian. Why? He was getting confused. Okay, but he still saw the invisible God, and he knew the value of something more. What value do we place on things that this world has to offer? That's the question. You see, Moses gave it all up because he lived in the constant presence of the invisible God. Remember, Adam and Eve walked away from the presence of God. Cain wanted to sin more, so what does he do? He goes away from the presence of God. If you want to live, you need to live in the presence of the invisible God. And so, Moses goes out there, spends 40 years in the wilderness. He finally says, okay, I can live life now. Now I can relax. I can forget about Egypt. He's gotten to a sense that he is now ready to enjoy his easier lifestyle. And God says to him at the age of 80, he says, now it's time to go to work.
Now look at my brother.
Most of us. All of us.
Well, he told me, is your birthday coming up or
Ah,
your...
you gone.
Oh, sorry, so you just turned 80.
Yeah, this year. Yeah.
Okay, so you just turned 80. So at 80 years of age, God says to Moses, I got work for you to do. Let's go back now and get started. And so Moses goes out, he goes back, eventually gets into, back into Egypt, goes through the whole thing, gets the people out of Egypt. And I tell you, I'm just going through the book of Exodus right now. And I thought I need something different because I read the Bible enough times, and I thought I need something different. So I'm deciding to read it in Croatian. Okay, so I'm trying to get it in Serbian, but they don't have it in Serbian on olive tree, so I'm trying to do it with it in Croatian. And so it's interesting going through it and the constant complaining. It's constant complaining. I was born in that country, okay, so I know something, but I just don't speak it very readily, so it's interesting to read for the first time that long of something in that language, okay? But it's interesting, but it's just there, constantly complaining. You know, we don't have food, then you give them food, then we don't have water, and we don't have the, just constantly complaining. You know, and Moses, he gets there to Mount Sinai, goes through that whole experience at Mount Sinai. And they go before the golden calf and everything else. And Moses is like, okay, Lord, come on. And so notice in Exodus chapter 33, verse 11, keep in mind, before we go to this issue with Moses, but it's in this context here, we need to understand that Moses was different with God. Because it says here in verse 11, and the Lord spake unto Moses face to face, as a man speaketh to his friend. So after 40 years in the wilderness, God was able to talk to Moses just like we're here. Not necessarily visibly here, but actually communicating, talking to him back and forth. We know that later on he actually sees him, the back part of God. We find that in Exodus chapter 33 or 34. But he talks to him. God, can you imagine walking down the road and you're talking to God and you know that God is listening? And then God answered you back. Can you imagine that? That was different because it was not like with a prophet. A prophet sees a vision or a dream or something like that. In this case here, Moses was different because he communicated to him face to face. And then we find this. And as Moses is talking to God, because this was, like I said, chapter 33, I think this is after the golden calf and all the other experience there. Moses says unto the Lord, see, thou sayest unto me, bring up this people, and thou hast not let me know whom thou wilt send with me. Yet thou hast said, I know thee by name, and thou hast also found grace in thy sight. He says, Moses saying, look, I need somebody to help me out with these people here. Now therefore I pray thee, if I had found grace in thy sight, show me now thy way, that I may know thee, that I may find grace in thy sight, and consider that this nation is thy people. In other words, how do I know that this is your people even? How do I know that these people grumbling and complaining every time we turn around? Now, how do I know? In other words, how do I know that this is your people? How do I know that for sure? How do I know that these are the people of God? How do I know that this is God's church? How do I know that I'm not just wasting my time in this wilderness? How do I know? Because that's actually his question that he's asking here. You see, and God gives him an assurance. And now, does God say, yes, this is it, this is it? Is that what God says? Notice the answer of God in verse 14. My presence shall go with thee, and I will give thee rest. Oh, can you imagine that? So here your question, you have all these questions. Who's going to come with me? And God says, my presence is going to go with you. My presence with you is sufficient. In volume 5 it says, Moses had a deep sense of the personal presence of God. He was not only looking down through the ages for Christ to be made manifest in the flesh, but he saw Christ in a special manner accompanying the children of Israel to their travels. He saw Christ. It was not just down the road, yeah, Christ is coming. No, he saw Christ right there. You see, God was real to him, ever present in his thoughts. Oh, that's the amazing thing. What was it? God was constantly in his thoughts. Every thought he had was with God involved in that discussion. And just going through Exodus, like I said, he keeps saying, look, what are you complaining to me? He says, I'm just doing what God said. God said this and I'm doing it. That's all I'm doing. You see, God was constantly present with him. He saw and acknowledged God in every detail of his life, and felt that he was under the eye of the all-seeing one who weighs motives and tries the heart of man. So God was with him constantly. In every thought he had God there. He looked to God and trusted in him for strength to carry him uncorrupted through every form of temptation. How? Uncorrupted through every form of temptation. It says here, the presence of God was sufficient to carry him through the most trying situations in which a man could be placed. What was making him go through every situation? What was it? Notice here it was what?
Presence.
The presence of God. The presence of God is what got them through every single situation in life. Now, God says, I'm going to be with you. My presence is with you. Is Moses satisfied with him? You know, the character of Moses, he looks at all of Egypt and the wealth of Egypt and he says, what? I want more. God says, my presence is with you. And Moses says, I want more. Did you know that? Let's take a look. What is Moses? How does he react? And he said unto me, if thy presence go not with me, carry us not up hence. So first of all, without your presence, forget it. For wherein shall it be known here that I and thy people have found grace in thy sight? Is it not that thou goest with us? So shall we be separated, I and thy people, from all the people that are upon the face of the earth. So how are we going to be distinct from all the other people?
The presence of God.
Presence of God. Presence of God makes the distinction. And the Lord said unto Moses, I will do this thing also that thou hast spoken, for thou hast found grace in my sight, and I know thee by thy name. So the identifying mark was that the presence of God is with him. That was the identifying mark. And then Moses goes on and says what? Thank you, Lord? No. He says what? Show me your glory. This guy's amazing. This guy is something else. You know, you give him a little bit, he wants more. Okay? You have all the wealth of Egypt, he says, I want more. Get all the education of Egypt, he says, I want more. Okay? God says, my presence is with you, and he says, I want more. I want to see your glory. Can you imagine that? Does God reprimand in that? Was that a presumptuous request? When Moses prayed, I beseech thee, show me thy glory, the Lord did not rebuke him, but he granted his prayer. Can you imagine that? God didn't say, what are you asking for? Stop your demands. No, God said, no problem. I'm going to show you my glory. And we're going to see that in a moment. We keep apart from God, and thus this is why we do not see the revealings of his power. You see, we're not demanding. We're not asking more of the glory of God. We're asking things for ourselves, yes. Where we almost pray like for Santa Claus, okay? You know, like kids, we learn from kids. Santa Claus, you go there and give a wish list. This is what we want. Give me this, give me that. And we pray how? Give me this, give me that, give me that. And we get disappointed because we didn't get the bright red bicycle this year. Okay? To where Moses was not like that. He wasn't looking for things. He wanted to be in God's presence. He wanted to be with God. You know, and it's amazing, you know, when you look at the life of Enoch. Enoch was, it says he walked with God. He walked so closely with God that one day God looked down and says, Enoch, come on up here. Come on up here. Yeah, it's enough. Just come on up here and be with me. And that's what it's going to be today too. One day it's going to be where God looks down and says, okay, come on up. Let's go. This is over. Okay. So, you know, when we look at the future, when we look at the end of this world's history and everything else, you know, what is to be revealed before the second coming of Jesus Christ? Notice Revelation 18:1. And after these things I saw another angel come down from heaven, having great power, and the earth was lightened with what? His glory. Let's just go back a bit for a moment here. Okay? What did Moses say? Show me thy glory. And what is going to happen in the end? The earth is lightened with what? With his glory. So here is what? Another angel. So here is another angel coming down from heaven, and the earth was lightened with his glory. Now we look at Revelation chapter 14, and you have there the first angel, then you have the second angel, then you have the third angel, and then immediately after that in chapter 14, it's after the close of probation. Chapter 15 takes you back to the 7 last plagues that happened right after the close of probation. But chapter 14 actually finishes with the second coming of Christ. So chapter 15 takes you prior to the second coming of Christ. Chapter 16 is the 7 last plagues. Chapter 17 takes you right back to the beginning of Babylon. Historically, it takes you right back into time. And then chapter 18 introduces another angel. And this angel is to do what? The earth was lightened with his glory, not after the second coming of Christ, but prior to the second coming of Christ. And that's why we identify another angel joining the 3 angels. So now, before this prophecy can be fulfilled, what must happen? Before that other angel can come and fill the whole earth with his glory, something must happen. It says, I know that a work must be done for the people, or many will not be prepared to receive the light of the angel sent down from heaven to lighten the whole earth with his glory. Which angel is the one that lightens the whole earth with his glory? Revelation 18 verse 1. Okay? But before this can happen, what must happen? A work must be done for the people. So something must be done to prepare us for that other angel. You see, it goes on. How important is that other angel? It goes on, unless those who can help in such and such are aroused to a sense of their duty, they will not recognize the work of God when the loud cry of the third angel shall be heard. When the light goes forth to lighten the earth, instead of coming up to the help of the Lord, they will want to bind about his work to meet their narrow ideas. Let me tell you that the Lord will work in this last work in a manner very much out of the common order of things, and in a way that will be contrary to any human plan. So we have all our plans and everything, and God works totally different. Why? Because he wants to lighten the earth with his glory. There will be those among us who will always want to control the work of God, to dictate even what movement shall be made when the work goes forward under the direction of the angel who joins the third angel in the message to be given to the world. So if you have three angels, the third angel, and another angel joins him, how many angels you got?
Oh,
You got four. You got the fourth angel there. Okay, so here it's what? The angel who what? Joins the third angel in the message to be given to the world. And who then directs the final work? Notice here, the work goes forward under the direction of that other angel. So the final work, the loud cry, goes under the direction of another angel. The fourth angel that you find here. Okay? So this angel is directing the closing work in this earth's history. So what kind of things will God use? It says here, God will use ways and means by which it will be seen that he is taking the reins in his own hands. The workers will be surprised by the simple means that he will use to bring about and perfect his work in righteousness. Be surprised at how God is working. Not only is this angel to direct the work, but notice in great controversy, as we look at the final call that comes out of Babylon, it says here of Babylon, at the time brought to view in this prophecy, it is declared her sins have reached unto heaven, and God has remembered her iniquities. This is Revelation 18, verse 5. Remember, Revelation 18:1 is the other angel being introduced. She has filled up the measure of her guilt, and destruction is about to fall upon her. But God still has a people in Babylon. And before the visitation of his judgment, these faithful ones must be called out, that they partake not of her sins and receive not of her plagues. Now notice this. Hence, the movement symbolized by the angel. Let me move this a little bit here. There we go. Hence, the movement symbolized by the angel coming down from heaven, lightening the earth with his glory, and crying mightily with a strong voice, announcing the sins of Babylon. So this other angel results in what? In what? In a movement. Okay? This whole thing results in a movement. Okay? In connection with his message, the call is heard, come out of her, my people, that ye be not. These announcements, uniting with the third angel message, constitute the final warning to be given to the inhabitants of the world. So what's the final warning? The final warning includes the work of that other angel. You can't separate the work of that other angel from the three angels' messages and the final warning given to this world. So, what is the final warning to the world? You see, it has to involve the message of that other angel. So now, is this something in the future? When we look at that other angel, are we looking forward to the coming of that other angel? Let's take a look. This was written back in the year 1892. It says, the time of test is just upon us, for the loud cry of the third angel has what? Already begun in the revelation of the righteousness of Christ, the sin-pardoning Redeemer. This is the beginning of the light of the angel whose glory shall fill the whole earth. So this fourth angel actually came when? In 1888. 1888 was the beginning of that other angel. And keep in mind that the work is to prepare a people first. It's not just to go and start with Babylon. It's actually to prepare a people beforehand. You see? So it's interesting the question that is asked here. It says the third angel's message must go over the land and awaken the people and call their attention to the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus. Another angel unites his voice with the third angel, and the earth is lightened with his glory. Okay, so what happens with the third angel? Another angel joins the third angel. Okay? And the light increases, and it shines out to all nations of the earth. It is to go forth as a light that burneth. It will be attended with great power until its golden beams have fallen upon every tongue, every people, every nation upon the face of this earth. So there's a preparatory work started in 1888. It's a preparatory work that goes to get ready to send a message to the whole world. And it's interesting, the question. Let me ask you, what are you doing to prepare for this work? This is just before the message of 1888. This was in 1885. What are you doing to prepare for this work? Are you building for eternity? You must remember that this angel, this other angel, represents the people that have this message and give to the world. So that angel, other angel, represents a people. It's not just a message, it actually represents a people. And the question that she asks is what? Are you among that people? Where are you? Are you among that people? Still with the third angel in 1885, but 3 years later, it was preparing for that other angel. Are you among the people that are prepared to accept this message and be that people? You see, are you among that people? Now, what we have to do is we have to get clarified what is the glory of God. Because we get confused what the glory of God is. Just like the disciples, we were studying our Sabbath school lesson this morning, the disciples were waiting for what? What were they waiting for?
King, really.
They were waiting for the king. In other words, they were confused with the second coming and the first coming. Okay? So, Christ goes through the crucifixion. Everything he told them is true. Christ resurrects. Okay? They spend a number of days with Jesus. 40 days with Christ. Christ ascends after spending 40 days. Brethren, this is after the resurrection. They spend 40 days with Christ. And Christ is there with them. And they ask him a question. What's the question they ask him?
When are you going to set up your kingdom?
Yeah, well, we're ready for your kingdom. What's going on here? They still couldn't figure it out. Why? Because they couldn't understand what glory means. You see, and today when we're thinking of glory, what are we thinking of? We're thinking of large church buildings. We're looking at big institutions. We're looking at all these different things. And we're missing what the glory is. So when we're looking for the glory of that other angel, we're looking for something that is not going to exist. So in Moses said, okay, show me your glory. And what does God say to him? Does God show and say, okay, let me zap you with my glory? Is that what he does? No, what does he do? And he said, and he said, I will make all my goodness pass before you. And I will proclaim the name of the Lord before thee, and will be gracious to whom I will be gracious, and I will show mercy on whom I will show mercy. And he said, thou canst not see my face, for there shall no man see me and live. And the Lord said, behold, there is a place by me, and thou shalt stand upon a rock. And it shall come to pass, while my glory passeth by, that I will put thee in the cleft of the rock, and will cover thee with my hand while I pass by. And I will take away my hand, and thou shalt see my back parts, but my face shall not be seen. What did God reveal to him?
His mercy. character.
His character. Brethren, that's the glory. The glory of God was not all that lightning and thunder, everything else. Remember Elijah? He went there to see God. And what did he look for? Big lightning. And it says what? God wasn't in the lightning. Big earthquake. He's ready. I'm not in the earthquake.
Still small voice.
Still small voice. Why? Because it has to do with character. When we're talking about the glory of that other angel, we are not talking about big manifestations. The focus has to be the character of God. God is preparing a people with his character. That's the glory of the other angel. It's not all these bells and whistles. It's actually the character of God. You know, when we look at the wicked, do you know what the biggest punishment for the wicked is? Biggest punishment that can happen. And this is interesting in 2 Thessalonians chapter 1. It says, "And to you who are troubled rest with us, when the Lord shall be revealed from heaven with his mighty angels, in flaming fire, taking vengeance on them that know not God, and that obey not the gospel of our Lord Jesus Christ, who shall be punished with everlasting destruction from what? From the presence of the Lord and from the glory of his power." In other words, what? The biggest, the punishment for the wicked is to be separated from the presence of God. And what else? From his character. The wicked don't want the character of God, so therefore you don't get his character. You don't get his presence. You see, that other angel, what it's all about is character. God is preparing a people that have a character like his. That's what that other angel is. It's not all these other things. It is a manifestation of his character. And when, of course, the character of God is perfectly reproduced in his people, then what?
He will come.
Then he comes to claim them as his own in Christ object lessons. You know, I remember hearing a story of J.W. Hall. He was a Scottish minister. And after he finished school, before he became a minister and everything else, he got a job as a railway station clerk. It was 14 kilometers from his home. So his home was over here, and then he was 14 kilometers over there. And on Saturday nights, he would have to walk home. And on Saturday night, he walked home with all the money from the station. So he collected all the funds during the week, and on Saturday night he has to go home, and then there he gets on the other side there. And to go home, you have to go through this deep gorge to go all the way. And it was full of robbers. And what his father would do is his father would meet him part of the way. So his father knew what time he starts coming, so he would start coming this way, and so they would meet together and then go together along the way. And one night as he was going home, he just got into the gorge and he felt somebody start following him. And he didn't want to look back. He was afraid to look back to see who's going to fall, who's following me. He's wondering, wow, where are these thieves going to be? They're going to beat me up. They're going to, who knows, leave me for dead, who knows what. And they're going down into the deepest part of the gorge, and he's waiting for that person just to clobber him over the head. And nothing's happening. He's just going through quietly. They're walking together. And then funny, he starts going on the other side of the gorge. And pretty soon he's outside of the gorge. And he's wondering, what's the guy going to do behind me, you know? And as he gets to the other side, funny, when it gets a little bit more light, he has to venture to look back behind him, and it's his dad. His dad was coming all along the way, following him there. And he says, well, Dad, how come you didn't say anything? He says, because I didn't want to alert the thieves. We know that the thieves are there. I didn't want to alert them that we're around here, so I just kind of walked walked you there that safe, all the way home. Many times we feel like we're walking alone. Many times we think that we're going on our own here in this wicked world. And yet in reality, the Father's presence is together with us. Jesus is with us every single step of the way. And what we need to be doing is we need to be constantly living in that presence. It's interesting, the prayer in Psalms 51, David had left God and everything else, and he's trying to get back. It says there, create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew the right spirit within me. Cast me not away from what? From thy presence. It was his presence that he wanted to be. Cast me not away from thy presence, and take not thy Holy Spirit from me. Restore unto me the joy of thy salvation, and uphold me with thy free spirit. Then will I teach transgressors thy ways, and sinners shall be converted unto thee. May the Lord help us as we had taken a little bit of time to look at Moses and look at the experiences that Moses had, that he was living in the presence of God. That as we come to these final end of this world's history, that we may all enter and live in the presence of God, and to be and to have that glory of God revealed in us, which is his character. Amen. In closing, we can sing.